we do with bonsai, we miniaturize the tree. Did you know that reducing the leaf size on the bonsai from this to this is a natural process? This tree gets as much water and as much fertilizer as it wants, yet the leaves stay small. Want to know more? Welcome, this is Jelle, growing bonsai, and we're looking at leaf reduction on bonsai. If you're growing bonsai, you might wonder, how do I get this big leaf that small? Now, to be able to create small leaves on your bonsai, it's important to know which factors influence the size of your leaves. First of all, the species, the variation within the species, the variation within the tree, then the environmental conditions, and then what we do to the tree. Let's take a look at some of the things like there are differences, of course, between species. This is Alcova. These are elms. The leaves have a very big size difference. Now, if you look at this, these are two species of elms. One species, the other species, all three of them free-growing in my garden. And what you already can tell is that this one has smaller leaves than this one. The variation within the species. There's Japanese maple, like the little princess, and they have small leaves by itself. They're only about that size. Under bonsai care they get maybe half or a third. So you get 1/2 inch leaves on a Japanese maple. If you take a normal green Japanese maple, the leaves might be that size if they're happy. Yet under bonsai care they can still go down to maybe 1 inch in size. So it is not just the cultivar, the variation within the tree. What you'll very quickly notice once you start growing out bonsai is that also the leaf size depends on the vigor of the branch that it is growing on. These branches I'm keeping short, I'm not allowing to extend all that much. I've actually tip pruned these all in spring because this is going to be the bonsai and this is just a sacrifice branch. And you can straight away see here on the sacrifice the leaves are a lot larger than here on the branches that I'm holding back. Holding a branch back will result in having smaller leaves overall. This of course now has almost ripe fruits. It's not aiding the development of a sacrifice branch, but it is nice. Do keep in mind, fruits on the bonsai and flowers on the bonsai typically are the same size as the ones on the regular tree. So this is a massive investment for the tree and I should actually be taking them off, except for it looks so cute. When you look at the leaves here on this sacrifice branch, if I take this leaf down, no, I don't want to take the leaf down. You know what, I'll get some leaves from down below. Because down here is the rest of the tree. This is what the tree itself has as leaves. Now, how is that for a difference? What you can tell here is that the side branches have smaller leaves than the main branch. This is the secondary growth of this year. This was the primary growth of this year. This extended strongly in full sun and is now pushing new growth on the sides. Doing quite well actually. This is a nice small leafed variety. You can imagine if you during the season then decide I'm going to pluck off the big leaves of this elm, you'll have a tree with actually quite small leaves. So sometimes you also use in your tree the variety, the natural variety of leaves. You say, well, I let this extend. At a certain point in spring, I'm going to prune it back, maybe to there. I'm going to prune this back and have a nice little pad. And at the same time, I'm taking out all the big leaves. Therefore, it looks like your tree is full of small leaves. One of the tricks in bonsai. If you like this sort of content, drop me a line if you have any questions or suggestions for a video. And, well, if you're not subscribed to the channel, go and do that now. Hit like, hit subscribe. Then the environmental conditions. Even between these two, this one has bigger leaves than that one. This one is growing in a somewhat shaded position and has access to a lot of water, whereas this is in full sun and is sitting a little bit drier. You can see already here, this branch is a lot thinner. The leaves are somewhat smaller, they're a little bit harder as well. And it's not growing as lusciously as this one. The leaves here are bigger, softer. This is much stronger extension growth than I have here. And also the internode distance, if you just look at how far are the leaves apart here, you can tell here the leaves are much further apart than in this branch, even though they're both at the same stage of development, right? So that's the difference between a sunny and a shaded growing spot. The shaded one will have longer growth. It might be a lot softer. The leaves can be softer, the leaves can be larger because the leaves need to work harder to get more sunlight. This one is in full sun, can be more compact, and because of a lack of water, particularly the last part of summer, you see that the extension slows down a little bit. And then what we do to the tree. Basically what we do with bonsai, we miniaturize the tree. This here is a Zelkova branch that I just clipped in my garden from a tree that I'm growing out. That tree is a cutting of this tree. Yeah, you hear that right. The leaves on this one and on that one are actually of the same species, the same individual even. This one growing in the full ground as a cutting from that one. Now, why do I have such big leaves here and why not on this bonsai? We miniaturize the tree. We do that by putting them in a small container. Well, in fact small, this is a big container for this small tree. And with that we restrict the root growth. The roots can't grow just kilometers away, they are stuck within this container. They're still healthy, we fertilize them, we water them, we provide optimal care, but the roots itself, they can't expand all that far. That for the tree already is a signal, hey, my resources are limited, maybe I should be more modest in my growth. Which is also why if you want to grow out a bonsai, you put them in a big container and you let them grow out. Next to this, now if you look here at this tree, what do you see that is different from this tree? Don't know if you know what I'm after. Of course here the distance between the individual leaves is a lot larger than here, but that is not what I'm after. This is part of the miniaturization. As the tree says, I need to be more conservative in my growth, the leaves are going to be closer to each other and they're going to be smaller. So that is part of the process. You put it in a smaller container, you still fertilize well, but because it is in a small container, the tree already naturally responds with more compact growth. Now what I am after is, if you look at this tree, you see that there's lots and lots and lots of branches, whereas this only has one branch. We prune. Every time we prune, the advice is always leave 2 leaves. That means that you get, for every single branch, you get 2 new branches. Sometimes the advice is also remove the leaves. That way you get a trigger here in the buds to start growing. You get a branch here, you get a branch there, and over time the tree gets more branches, because the next side branch, of course, you're going to do the same thing, right? Then, because this distance is so large, we also recommend in bonsai that you go and look at the base of the branches. Now here, this is not the base of the branch because I just clipped it off a bigger tree. But you already see the effect a little bit. As the tree starts growing, you see that the distance between the nodes is quite short at the beginning of the season and gets longer towards the end of the season. Now, when you're developing your bonsai, you can actually help getting short internodes and therefore more compact growth and therefore more branches per inch of extension growth. This is a side branch, right? I just pulled this off of the main tree. This is a side branch coming off like that. Now what you can tell here, and I'm going to flip it around again to see the back better, is that in fact you have a leaf. Can you see this? There's a leaf there, there's a leaf there, there's a leaf there, there's a leaf there. So in the first inch or so the first 2 centimeters, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 leaves. Then here the distance starts to extend. And here, look at this distance compared to the distance here. This is a lot bigger. The leaves here are a lot smaller as well. The first few leaves of the growing season quite often are much closer to each other and much smaller. You can of course imagine what happens if you say, I'm not going to prune it here in the first part, but I'm going to prune it much further away. Say, I'm going to prune it here. Then this is of course gone with these massive internodes. Look at that. Compare these internodes here and there. This is all gone, but still you have these big internodes here. And what will happen? These buds are the first ones to push. These will come later. Therefore, often what is said, you prune back to 2 or 3 nodes. First of all, you get the maximum ramification on your tree, but also the first nodes of the season are quite near to each other. So here you could go clip it like that. Now you have very small leaves and a very short internode. Now compare that to this. And this is on the same branch, right? In fact, What is well demonstrated here on this branch is that once you trigger these buds to start growing, the distance might be very short. This allows for more branches. More branches per centimeter means that the resources that come up through this branch are distributed over more leaves, therefore the leaves are smaller. You already see the third effect. And this is something which is not something that you should be doing if you are just beginning with bonsai and your trees are in a very early development stage. And that's the component of defoliation. Defoliation is exactly what you think it is. It is removing the foliage from a tree. Now, before I continue with this video, it is very important to realize that you should only take these sort of actions on your tree when it's nice and healthy. This also answers one of the questions whether bonsai is basically just torturing a plant to stay small. No, you do these operations on plants that are fully healthy, otherwise you indeed risk the health of the tree. And that's not the intent. A dead bonsai, it's not a bonsai. And what you get is a tree like this, and in a response to the defoliation, the tree will start issuing new branches, new leaves, new buds. These buds, they were not intended to push this summer. Only the growing tips were pushing. The inner buds were basically paused, halted. By now removing the growing tips, I've told the tree, no, you're not extending. I want those inner buds to start pushing. And if you look closely here, you see that all these buds are swelling, get red tips everywhere. Even on the more mature branches, I now get growth. But these buds, they are not provided with extra nutrients. They didn't have any energy stored. They were just sitting there dormant, waiting for an eventuality, just like this, that all the leaves are gone. Now you see here, the end buds and the top buds have started to push slightly, but the rest of the tree is still urgently scrambling all the resources to start growing. As a result, the growth will be very fine, but the leaves will also be quite small. Look at these leaves. These are still extending, but they're quite small. So that is also what's happening. And you can also see that here on the Zelkova branch that I clipped off this morning. This is a side branch that has formed, and the leaves here are a lot smaller already. Because these are the main leaves, this is just a little side branch. You can remove the leaves here so you have a better view. Look at that, how much smaller these leaves are already. So these are the most common techniques for creating small leaves on your bonsai. You restrict the growth. You make sure you get lots and lots of nice branches on there. And once your tree is more mature with lots and lots of fine branches already, in summer you prune back. You open up the canopy. You don't need to go full defoliation. You can also just remove part of the leaves, triggering the inner leaves to start growing, or the inner branches to start growing. And with that you get finer branches and smaller leaves. Removing nutrients from your plant is a technique that's sometimes taught. I'm not a big fan for trees that you're really still pushing because you still want to develop it. Of course, over time, as your tree matures, it will need less nutrients, and you can time your nutrients and you can start saying, oh, okay, I'm going to fertilize less in spring as the tree is growing and more in fall. So that way the reserves are stored in the trunk, but there's not an abundance of nutrients in the soil as it starts pushing, also leading to smaller, finer growth. So that's a little summary of how do you create small leaves on your bonsai. Now if you ask me what is the most important factor after the species, that is the pruning of the tree, increasing your ramification. Everything else is secondary to that. If you create a tree that's very well ramified and it is of the right species, like a Zelkova, you get very fine twigging, small leaves, compact growth. Add to that the pot. We've actually not really spoken about the pot. So what will happen is that if you don't repot all that frequently, the roots get less and less space. This is tricky because they also get less air and they get less water. But it signals the tree even stronger. You are in a restricted growing space, so be conservative in how much you expand and how big you grow. That is a little recap of how do you create small leaves on your bonsai. I hope it was of help. If you have any thoughts, any questions, please leave a comment below. If you like the content like this, I welcome you to subscribe and hit that like button. And of course, share the video. That was it for now. Keep growing bonsai. This is Jelle, growing bonsai on small leaves or big leaves. See you next time.